Three, two, one. Ladies and gentlemen, Mikel Ellcessor, which is someone that I really admire, and he's actually on my show today, and so thrilled and honored to have you here. How are you keeping, Michael?
I'm doing really well, Wayne. Thanks for having me today. It's great to be here.
Are you in Dayton, Ohio? I'm in Singapore, so where exactly are you right now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, sort of right in the middle of the country. Now I'm a little bit further north. I'm right outside of Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, Michigan. How far is that from, I don't know, from the East Coast, the West Coast?
It's a 1 hour flight from New York. I spent a couple of years working in New York City all the time and would commute there every Sunday night and come back every Friday morning. So it's like a 1 hour flight. It's really easy.
Fantastic. And I love New York. I was there probably in February this year to watch my favorite bucket list band, Mr. Bungle. I'm wearing the t-shirt today.
Great.
So we had a reunion gig at Brooklyn Steel, and so memorable. And that was just before the pandemic really struck, and basically the world just went really messy after that. So how has this year been for you?
Look, it's been a lot of the same. I was in New York at just about the same time, and then was in Atlanta the weekend before everything shut down, working with a client. And this room that I'm in right now, I've like I think a lot of people's lives, barely left for the last couple of months. But look, I'm really grateful. There have been some people in my life who've been ill, but overall, the people that are closest to me, have gotten through this okay. I'm a little bit grayer. Everybody's a little bit squirrelier, but we're doing good. And I hope it's the same for the folks that are with us, on this. It's been a hard year, but we've got 2021 coming really soon.
Well, right here in Singapore, we have 0 cases for, I think, 2 weeks running. So things seem to be settling down.
That's great.
Over there, I hope, things will also be fine after maybe with all these actions that have been taken by your authorities, right? The right way this time, things will settle down really well in the next few months to come, I hope.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've got some really dark weeks coming up ahead of us, but it's absolutely going to get better. So we've just got to stay calm and stay present and do what we know we need to do. And thankfully, I've got snow on the ground outside, so there are fewer reasons to go out. So I'm just going to ride it out.
All right, let's jump right into the subject topic that we're all eager to learn from you personally, because you are the veteran in this industry and from the time when you started out in radio. So we just want to back things up a little bit and go right back to when you first heard your first radio show. And in the end, how did you actually ended up in this podcasting space? Tell us the entire journey of yours.
Sure. It's in so many ways, it's really simple, and it was a thing that could happen back then. So I'm 56, and so this story really starts back in the 1970s, where I just grew up listening to tons and tons of radio from all over the country, and really fell in love with the voices that I could stay up with late at night, with a little radio and a little earbud from being pretty young, and then I had an uncle that was at college, and he put me on the air at his college radio station when I was 14. And that experience just kind of set me off on a path, and did a lot of radio in college in Cleveland in the early 80s, which was a really fertile town for exciting music and young people making radio. And you really got a chance to learn and experiment and find out who you were behind the microphone. And then I fell in with a group of folks in Pittsburgh, and we relaunched a defunct radio station in Pittsburgh in 1987, WYEP, which is continued to thrive. And it's a great town. Pittsburgh is an extraordinary city. And again, it was another place. I was 21 at the time, and it was a place to, again, experiment, discover who you are, really have audio as a truly creative and community building kind of experience. Fast forward to just a lot of years of working in the music industry and working in radio. Found myself in New York in 1999, and I went there to work for WNYC, which was a station that was still finding itself from sort of previous incarnations, where it didn't really know what relationship it wanted to have to the city, and was owned by the city of New York and had recently become independent. And so we were able to make a lot more decisions and again, sort of chart our own way. I was the programmer of WNYC in New York on September the 11th, and our studios were just a couple of blocks from the event. So that was a very sharp turn for everybody in the world that was, affected by that, of course. But for those of us that were there, and that really made a sharp turn for my career, because it really pushed Jad Abumrad and I together. And, some months after 9/11, he and I started talking about some ideas that we each separately been kind of kicking around about how could we do things that were more creative, that were more experimental, that were reflecting all of the independent producers who were growing up at the time and emerging and releasing these great audio documentaries and audio art pieces and telling stories in a more individualistic voice. And how could we make room for them? So we launched Radiolab in New York, and this is very much not the show that people know now. It was really an audio documentary showcase when we originally launched the show. And Jad was kind of a DJ of documentaries. We were selecting them and he was stitching them together. And it was 3 hours long on a Sunday night on an AM radio station. It wasn't really easy to find or to hear, but going back to where I started, Wayne, it was a place to experiment and to find a voice and to think deeply about how to do it creatively. And we had a really supportive environment, especially with Dean Capello at the time, who was leading content for WNYC, created room for us. And so I worked with Jad on that iteration of Radiolab for about a year and a half. Ellen Horn, who became the executive producer at that time, joined, and the Radiolab that people think of now started to take shape. Jad and Robert Krulwich started their relationship. Jad and Ellen became an incredibly powerful creative partnership. I provided oversight and more sort of a managerial role and less of a direct editorial role with the show. And then Radiolab just kind of grew and grew. I left WNYC to do other things, and then reconnected with them a couple of years ago when they needed some additional support on the managerial side, but especially on the revenue generating side. They were having some terrific success with getting people to become paid members of the show, but they knew it could go a lot farther. And I'd had a lot of success with helping to inspire people to become paying members. And so they asked me to do that for Radiolab at WNYC. And not just do it for Radiolab, but do it for all of the shows in the WNYC Studios portfolio, which was Freakonomics Radio and Two Dope Queens and On the Media, and a really broad range of shows. And we had a lot of success with getting folks to join in. So that's, 30 years of radio compressed into a couple of minutes.
Fantastic. I think that's the best ever, story of how you navigated your career. And I think what really captured my attention was when you mentioned about how WNYC, right, basically birthed the first on-demand audio strategy. And it really, helped to make monetization for doing on-demand audio possible. And of course, we're going to dive into monetization for podcasting later on. But first, I saw that you wrote on your website that you were thinking about the future when you helped launch your first radio station at age 21, right? And it was on your mind when Jad and you co-founded Radiolab. And also the same thing happened in 2005 when you turned On the Media into the podcast, giving birth to WNYC's first on-demand audio strategy. So what's actually on your mind these days during post-pandemic times? Yeah,
I mean, there are two really big things that are on my mind. One is new voices and making spaces for new voices in podcasting. That's been really important for me throughout my whole time in media, is how do we bring people in who were not the usual suspects. So when I came into public radio, I was very young. I'm not a journalist. And I was doing music programming. It was really meant to be fairly popular music programming. That was not what public radio in the United States was all about at that time. And ever since then, I've just been asking, how do we create more space for more different kinds of voices for people who don't look like me or don't have my background or just think differently or who have different creative desires? Just how do we create more room for them as makers? How do we hand over more and more and more authority to them, get out of the way? And then also, how do we create economic models so that they can have good careers as artists? You know, we used to joke at a station that I used to be at is that, you know, our job was to help every musician that we were playing to quit their day job. I think that's kind of the same thing for the people who are looking to have podcasting as a creative expression now. You know, we need to find ways to create a healthier, more diverse range of economic models and incentives for the communities to come in and form up around these makers. Because I just think everybody gets more of what they want that way. Audiences have a wider range of really high quality shows to listen to, and more makers can be fully expressing themselves as creative people and be able to make a decent living, a good middle class living, or maybe even more doing that. So that's what's really on my mind. And frankly, it's the same thing that's been in different ways on my mind for the whole time. Just instead of doing it with local radio, as I did for a long, long time, it's really focused around podcasting now.
This is fantastic. I think segues really nicely to the next question. Like many podcasters, especially in Asia, actually find it very difficult, or it's actually a huge hurdle for them to actually ask for money because they have this difficulty of bringing their audience into their mission. And probably, you know, Asians, we are more conservative and we don't have that open heart approach to draw people in, right? And actually do the ask. So what are the tips that you can share with podcasters who are facing this sort of difficulty in basically interrogating their own relationship with money and being so unclear about the craft of the ask, which has to be, you know, to really cut through and to be specific?
Yeah, boy, thank you for asking that question. I mean, that's the thing that's deeply, deeply important to me, Wayne, because it's hard. I think it's, you know, whether you're a podcaster, an Asian podcaster, a podcaster working in Asia, or somebody here in the United States or in the European Union, you know, what is required to ask people to give you money is risky. It feels risky because it feels challenging. It feels emotionally vulnerable. And what if they tell me no, right? Those are the most normal human responses to that. And everybody has some version of it. And no matter how effective somebody has been, and look, I raised $6.5 million at WNYC Studios. I've raised tens and tens of millions of dollars for public radio station producers. I had to go through every single thing that any person is going through right now, you know, where you do have to, and thank you for that phrase, interrogate your relationship with money, you know. So I think the first and the most important thing is to recognize it's the most natural and normal and expected thing in the world. And it's a set of skills that one acquires over time and a path of introspection that one has to go through. And then it's recognizing that there's an axis, you know, that it's a transactional to aspirational axis that exists, that there are ways to ask for money that is fundamentally transactional. Give me money, I'll send you a thing. Give me money and I'll create an experience for you. Give me money and I'll give you access to different types of audio. So it's a little bit more transactional. The quid pro quo is right there. And then there's the full-on aspirational side of it, which is give us money because we're on this emotional, spiritual, creative journey together, right? And we're just here because we're a tribe and we're each going to throw a little bit of money into the pot, and you'll do your part, podcast maker, and I'll do my part. I'll listen and I'll share it with my friends and I'll give you $5 a month, right? So there's an axis there. Neither one of them are correct. It's all part of the same thing. It's just a continuum. And it's finding that there's a balance, that there's a mix between all of that works for your brand, where you are with your comfort level with all of it, what works for your workflow and how much time can you put into this, and what's the relationship, which goes back to the brand, that you've trained the audience in around all of this, if they believe that their relationship is just to sit back in a backward leaning position and just receive all of this content from you, it's going to be much harder to get them to then lean in and give money. That more transactional approach might be more reflective of that lean back relationship. If the relationship has been like, hey, we're all going on this like big quest together and we're going to do media like nobody can find anywhere else in the world, and it really speaks to our community and our concerns, and I'm the only person that's going to have these conversations that you need to hear, that's a much more visceral, lean in kind of relationship. So that direct personal ask is going to be more aligned with the brand. So, to kind of tie it all together, it's just recognizing that everybody's going to be asking these questions, that there's a continuum around all of it, that neither one of it is sort of good or bad or right or wrong. And it's just really figuring out in a very strategic and then in a very tactical way, what makes sense for you, what's a natural expression for the show and for the relationship that you have with the listener, and then just start building and experimenting and trying and being very, very used to failing. And I'll conclude with this, is that the thing that every single person that does this kind of work has to face at some point, and will face repeatedly, is I've made an ask and I didn't get the result that I wanted. And that must mean that my work is not appreciated, or I'm not a valuable person. And it's the challenge to always recognize you have to separate yourself from the results and remain donor-centric, remain member-centric, that it's always about, did the message resonate with them? Did they have time? Did you reach them at a time when they had discretionary income? Did you speak to them in a way that fits with what their vision of the brand is? So it's not about you as a person. It's still the sort of tactical thing, but moving out of that producer-centric vision and into a donor-centric or a member-centric vision is a critical step that everybody has to go through, and has to go through over and over again. So that's the stuff that's always on my mind about that.
Great sharing, Michael. Many podcasters in our PodFest Asia community actually don't really appreciate and admire the slow organic growth for Radiolab. So what's your advice to those who are seeking fast and furious solutions instead of the slow and steady? Like, how important is it to understand that creativity is a daily practice and they need to stay in it, stay on in it, and stay with it? Yeah,
it's like water on stone, Wayne. You have to be there. It's, I don't think it's different in podcasting than if you were an independent band or a filmmaker, or if you wanted to be a YouTube vlogger. I mean, some people have the idea that I will have the algorithm do the work for me, and that's what will deliver the audience and the results. And then whatever people are in it for, whatever kind of, fame or sex or money or accolades or material goods, or like whatever the thing that people get tied up in with the success. It's recognizing that, what makes these things successful is that people bring their whole creative selves to it. They do the work persistently over a very, very long time, as long as it takes. And then getting your head correct about number one, what is your criteria for success? Why has that become your criteria for success? What does that mean for you? What is the proxy that is serving? And is that serving you? Is it serving your work? Is your work serving an audience in a community? There are lots of growth hacks and formats that people can go after. They're going to be more likely to deliver large audiences. I guess if that's not authentically you, people are going to smell that. And there are a lot of people who work at, again, sort of at a very particular level that might not look like it's the most famous or most lucrative level, but it fits. It provides them with happiness. It's consonant with what their soul is, And so I think it's just being really clear, like, why are you in it? What do you want to get out of this? Is that really who you are? Because look, podcasting, if it's about rich quick, this is a lousy medium to do it. Newsflash.
That's funny coming out from you, and it's like we have to also ask you about the birth of Radiolab in terms of the radical experiments that were happening right post 9/11. I think you briefly mentioned about, I think around 2002. So there was an opportunity right where others see obstacles. So during that time, Radiolab actually emerged and grew during that time. Tell us more about that particular period in time.
Well, look, I mean, there's really something to be said for being obscure for a period of time. We didn't require a lot of resources from WNYC, so we were able to do work and experiment and fail and try things and kind of thrash around in the corner. But again, we weren't drawing down huge amounts of money from the company. And we were in an obscure time. Sunday nights on an AM radio station in New York City is not prime shorefront real estate. So the risk and the expectations were kind of level set, right? So we weren't drawing down this huge budget, which then we had to deliver huge results. And just frankly, we had a group of people around us who were incredibly supportive of us being on a creative journey. And that sounds very vague and sort of detached from accountability. That's not the case. We still had to be demonstrating why we were getting somewhere in our work. And being able to communicate that was principally my job, so that Jad could go off and try things and find his voice. And it was a long time of saying to people, I believe that this is an extremely talented person that we need to invest in, that we need to, again, leave room and be patient and take a breath. And that's one of the greatest joys that I've always had in my life, whether it's with a band when I was doing music radio, or working with creators as I've done for a long, long time now, or working with brands or not-for-profit organizations who are trying to make a difference in the world, is representing them and standing up for them and seeing their mission and their vision and getting people to come on board and do that. I really love that, because I believed in Jad, just like I believed in Brooke and Bob and Arun and where we were with On the Media, and just like I believe in the people that I work with now. But you have to find a way as the manager to communicate in a way that's meaningful to the people that you report to. And that's really our work as the people in those roles. You have to get serious about understanding what your bosses, whoever they are, financiers, people further up the organizational chart, the people at home who are wondering why you're gone so long. You have to find a way of opening yourself up and communicating the value of what you're doing, why you're really passionate about it, and then listening to them and listening for what they need to keep recommitting to you, and then suck it up and find a way to make an agreement with them and recognize you're probably going to have to give something up, and so that they'll be willing to give something up, so that you meet in the middle and create that relationship. It's really the hard work of becoming a manager and also an advocate for creative people. You know, you have to learn how to speak passionately in a way that moves people. And then you also have to learn to shut your mouth and really listen to what they're saying and see the world through their eyes and find a way to get those things to work together.
This is brilliant. While researching for this session, I was listening to your other podcast, I think your appearance on the Supercast. So you mentioned on that show that you were very wrong that podcasting would ripple out and that we still do not have a strong fiction category. So what are the three things that you think about a lot to make this grow faster?
Yeah, well, I do think the expansion of monetization is critical. I just think that's it. You can't decouple the category growth from the monetization, right? So ad-based monetization is going to support certain categories, certain types of talent, certain types of shows, right? So that's just what ad-based is. It can't be the one size fits all solution. Just like member monetization is not a one size fits all solution, but we're all the way up here in terms of development in the podcasting space with advertising, and we're still way down here with member support. So I really believe that we have to get member support to be as sophisticated and as widely adopted as advertising. And then that's going to create a much more fertile ground for a wider range of makers to show up. That then helps to address, or at least put pressure on some of these questions around adoption, new audiences coming in, so podcasting gets bigger. That then creates incentives for the platforms and the technologists to create more tools to fix discovery. So you can start to see the ecosystem has to work together that way, but we still have these inequities that are baked in. And I just think they're just normal parts of how things grow and develop over time. You can't fix everything all at once. They're going to come on in different times. But I think 2021 is going to be a really important year for member monetization. And I think that's going to create some really great opportunities for more makers.
This is brilliant again. So we are gonna, reluctantly say goodbye to you in a couple of minutes' time. We're already on the 27-minute mark. Time really passed by really fast, right? When we're having a conversation. So the last question I have for you is: your life more than podcasts?
Say that one more time.
Is your life more than podcasts?
Oh my gosh! Yeah, yeah, very much. Yeah. I'm a dad. I have a couple of kids that I'm raising that I've adopted, and that's very, very important to me. And I still am a fanatical music person as much as I was when I got on the air doing radio when I was 14 and playing records. And independent film and video means a lot to me, and exercise and well-being and art. And one of the things that I miss the most with the pandemic is being able to travel to museums. I miss that a lot. And being able to be in a space with other people, to see a film or to go to a museum, and to be able to feel close in a community and experience something together, sitting in a room, looking at a screen, and everybody inhales at the same time when something happens on the screen. It doesn't matter how good the home theater is. There's no substitute for that. And I think that's it's just one of the great joys of life. So thank you for asking that question. It really, getting beyond podcasting, which is pretty fantastic, but is also just can be boring if that's all you do all the time. So thanks.
Your answer really resonated with me because I miss going to concerts, especially in New York, where all the great bands are playing almost every night. And I miss that sense of belonging, the sense of community, the sense of tribe. And basically everyone taking care of each other. Yeah? It's like you show up a gig without a ticket and somebody would actually offer you a spare ticket or sell it to you at face value, not above value. Those are the micro moments I really miss. And I hope that this pandemic will be over soon for everyone, in the world. And one day you can, come to Singapore and visit our PodFest Asia community here and maybe do an in-person talk to our community. I think we will really appreciate you, coming all the way here, when it's safe to do so. And so sadly, we have to let you go. And I hope that you'll come back next time to maybe share more insights and advice and tips with us. Thank you, Michael.
It'd be a delight. I'm really humbled. Anything that I can do for folks, just reach out. I'm the easiest person in the world to find. But thank you, Wayne. Thank you for what you're doing. I mean, community building is vital. Just thanks to everybody that joined today, and we'll see you down the road.
Thank you so much, Michael. You keep yourself safe and take care of each other over there. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers.